All right, welcome back to the Commanders Declassified podcast. We are happy to be back. It is football season. Training camp is well underway. So when training camp is happening, we got to go and get you somebody who knows exactly what's going down there. You've heard him on this podcast before. We have our guy Matthew. Matthew, why don't you say what's up to the people?
Is that all right?
Hey,
y'all good?
so yeah, I think we're clear here. Matthew, why don't you tell people they can find you on social media?
Oh yeah, sorry. There was a thing that was really loud. Did you guys hear that or no?
No, we heard it, but we're gonna work. It's gone now.
Okay, we're good. Sorry, I didn't. All right, we can edit that out or whatever. Yeah, you can follow me at Matthew_Paris on Twitter. That's Paras. If you're reading the podcast description, you can hopefully know how to spell my last name. So appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm always so scared to say it out loud because I'm afraid I'm going to say it wrong, but it's just Paris as in France, right? So
yeah, like the city. Yeah, or the Pokemon if you're into that sort of thing.
there you go. So let's jump right into training camp. And, it's been a productive several days so far at training camp. Give me your overall impression of how things are going down out there.
Yeah, it's been an interesting kind of a few days. There's not necessarily as much news as in years past, or there aren't your certain position battles that you're super watching closely because you look up and down this roster, a lot of the starting spots are already kind of settled, which is unusual for this team. But the annual tradition of training camp for Washington is they have a new quarterback, and with that becomes certain adjustments, and you know that's been the case so far. Carson Wentz, I think, is going through it a little bit. He had a much better day today, but he's going through those growing pains of learning a new offense, stuff that I think is normal for the NFL this time of year. But he's not used to the scheme just yet, and I think that's kind of apparent as he's working through it.
Matthew, I know Ron he said a bunch throughout this offseason that, this is year 3. This is a big year for the team, for the coaches, for the players, for everyone to kind of take a step forward. Sometimes that's just kind of talk, it's kind of coach speak. Are you guys actually kind of, when you talk to players, are you sensing any additional urgency this year about, with them or maybe some of the assistant coaches in terms of, hey, this is the 3rd year? We do need to be dialed in, right? We do need to do something better than 7-10. Are you sensing any of that, or is it kind of just rolling along same old as last year?
No, I think players kind of embrace it. They haven't openly come out and said we have to make the playoffs. I don't think they want to put that type of pressure on themselves. But I think if they looked at last year's situation, Jack Del Rio, of all people, have kind of referred to it as being humble pie. I think. Sure. There was a little bit of humility with how much the defense, especially, kind of was responsible for the last season's letdown. So that's a unit that, I know Wentz. I just said that Wentz is kind of struggling and working through things, but I think the defense is kind of making him struggle. And you look at the continuity on that unit. I don't know how much better they'll be, but they certainly look a lot better than last year so far. And I do think there's things that carry over. I think we saw it a little bit last season when they started to hit that stride before the COVID streak kind of hit in. They showed some potential, and I think you're kind of starting to see that again. The secondary just looks a lot much better. There's really not that kind of wink link as there was maybe a year ago.
Yeah, speaking of a year ago, Matthew, I guess kind of leads into my next question is you alluded to it a little bit before, but what do you really see or do you see a huge or minor or any difference in just the way the team is looking or approaching camp as compared to this time at this point last year, a week into training camp?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the weird thing about last year, there wasn't really a lot of as camp was unfolding, there wasn't a lot of this is going to be a rough year for them. I think the media core was relatively high on the group after that promising 2020 season. And, they talked, Chase Young and Montez Sweat talked about breaking records, and we don't really, buy into that. But it made it for a fun camp. It seemed like they were, Rivera talked about that maturity, where they're going to take this step forward. And this year, there's definitely less like embracing, oh, we're going to be the best defense in the NFL. I don't think, one, they really haven't been asked about it, because I think we saw that last year that they weren't. So there's not much to ask. But even when asking, like, hey, do you regret those comments from a year ago? Someone like, Montez Sweat is like, well, I think we're still capable of it, but, we're going to focus on winning first. So it's just, I think there's a difference in attitude, but specifically like to what's different from a year ago, I just think it's like kind of noticeable in the play. Like you look at a guy like William Jackson, he was really going through it last year with, Terry McLaurin was kind of beating him all over the place. And it's been much more even this year. He just kind of looks more in sync with the rest of the secondary. And yeah, it's quite noticeable to me anyway.
You talked about Carson Wentz, and obviously he's going to be the big story throughout the entirety of camp, because he's sort of the keys to what we have going on this season. Last year we had Heineke. Well, at least at this point in camp it was Fitzpatrick, and then Heineke sort of emerged. Do you see a noticeable difference even through Carson's struggle in terms of the way that the offense operates under Carson, or is it still too early to see that at this point in camp?
Yes and no. I think there are things that Scott Turner likes to do that I think even Heineke, would do. I think, pushing the ball down the field, taking those shots. Heineke didn't have the arm strength for it, but he tried. And you're seeing Carson Wentz try too, that the completions aren't always accurate, but when they are, it looks pretty. Like, he can make throws that Taylor Heineke just can't make. You're seeing that the first couple days of camp and even, OTAs and stuff. But it's just more so the consistency that I think is really kind of I think for Carson Wentz right now. He's had a lot of incompletions, threw a couple interceptions the other day, but you do see him starting to figure it out too, because I thought today was his best day in terms of ball placement and hitting a connection with guys like Colt Turner, who seems to be emerging as one of his favorite targets, and then spreading the ball around to Dotson and McLaurin. It's kind of been a little bit evenly distributed so far.
Matthew, sticking with the offense there, having not been to training camp just yet, reading, your tweets, others' tweets and articles and things like that, it does seem like Carson has at least somewhat of a rapport with Jahan Dotson. Maybe not so much Terry just yet. Is it as noticeable kind of from reading these tweets from you guys reporting, as you're there looking at it, that there is kind of that budding chemistry with Jahan and Carson?
I think so. He's a guy that, Dotson has really impressed me with how just kind of smooth he is with his overall game, and just being right place, right time. He seems to kind of have a knack for being in the right position and maintaining control. I thought the connection was a little bit more noticeable in the spring. Now, that's because McLaurin wasn't there. But, I think McLaurin is kind of still getting into they're still working on their timing specifically. I don't think it's bad per se. It's just, you don't see Terry making these kind of ridiculous catches and are all over the place kind of as you have in years past. But, I think he's still kind of making up for lost time. It's just, you're seeing that connection with Dotson. But I honestly, if I had to say what's his number one connection right now, it honestly might be Colt Turner.
Wow.
So today was the first day in pads. Excuse me. Did you, I guess, was there anything that surprised you or anybody that kind of showed out a little bit more now that the pads are on, or was it kind of everybody's continuing to progress at the same speed? Was there anybody that really jumped out at you today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was watching Brian Robinson because I think I'm going to write a story about him later this week. So, I was seeing that just to see how he was kind of handling that physicality, and you do see that size translate. Besides that, guys like, just watching some of the interior offensive linemen, like the backups, who I don't know necessarily if they have a big role on the team, but a guy like Chris Paul, I think, is coming along a little bit well. He was working with the third team last week, now with the second team. Sadiq Charles was holding his own, against starters, and so it is, there's definitely a noticeable physicality, and even a guy I also wanted to shout out. Sorry for rambling here, but Dax Milne, he's had a really nice camp, and he had this catch today where he was just absolutely blasted as he caught it, but he made control to the ground and really made this impressive catch, and he's really had a nice camp for. I don't know what his actual role will be in the regular season, but Curtis Samuel's hurt right now, and I think he's a guy that has kind of stepped in to the role here and Dion Brown.
I love hearing about Dion Brown too. I got a couple questions in a row here for you, but with respect to Dax Milne, do you feel like at this point he's safe in terms of roster opportunities, or do you think he's still fighting on the bubble?
I do think he's still fighting it, especially because kick returner is so up in the air right now. Alex Erickson, who I don't think has really popped as a receiver quite yet. You see him ahead of Milne when doing punt returns and those sorts of things. I think Milne can be the punt returner if it came to that. But, if they're going to keep 6 receivers, they could keep 7 because they did last year. But I don't think they have necessarily the same amount of talent or the same amount of depth as they did last year with. There's no DeAndre Carter, so I would guess they keep 6, and I would say the 6th spot would be between Erickson
and Milne. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to give you a couple of players that we've been hearing a lot about so far in camp, and you tell me if you're pumping the brakes on them or if you're buying the hype on them so far. All right.
I understand. All right.
All right. I'm going to start with the one you just mentioned, Brian Robinson. Are we pumping the brakes or are we buying the hype?
I think we're buying the hype.
Yeah.
It's, he's strong. He's really just kind of physically imposing in person. And I think the reason I'm buying the hype too is it just seems like Randy Jordan loves him some Brian Robinson, position coach. And, I think Antonio Gibson's had an impressive offseason in terms of losing weight and kind of showing up in better shape and taking those steps forward. But there's just a role for Brian Robinson on this team. They need that short yardage running back. But even I think he'll have more of a role behind that. I think this is very much going to be a rotation that depends on rhythm. If Brian Robinson is a guy that is feeling it at the moment, they're going to stick with Brian Robinson. But that said, I would still expect Antonio Gibson to be the main back to receive the majority of the carries. I'm curious if the fumble issues continue for Gibson, how short the leash is, because you do get the sense that Robinson is waiting in the wings here.
Oh, you're making me nervous now. Gibson's my guy. All right.
Oh no, I'm still relatively high on Gibson too. I just, I've only seen training camp. It's hard to watch. And Brian Robinson could run for 2.5 yards in his first preseason game, and that might be a silly year. So, all this with a caveat.
Absolutely. All right, next guy, Colt Turner.
Well, I feel like I mentioned it earlier. It does seem like I'm going to buy, but just because, tight end is a position right now that's really bunched together because Logan Thomas is hurt. He won't be back for some time. John Bates, who would seem like the logical number 1 after that, he's dealing with a calf injury right now. Don't know when he'll be back. And there were these guys, it was Colt Turner, Samus Reyes, Armani Rogers, and Alex Arma. Those 4 were kind of bunched together as the next kind of group there. And in the past few days, it's Colt Turner that's really separated himself among that group. And I think the thing that stands out to me about him is, of course, there's the size, which is going to make him a red zone threat. But you see those vertical routes down the field. You see those intermediate routes of him crossing the middle. And I think because he has that size, he can withstand those hard-hitting safeties. And historically, if you look at Carson Wentz and how he loves to target tight ends like Zach Ertz, it seems like he's really had some affinity for Colt Turner right now. And so I do buy it, but mostly because I think Carson Wentz is showing that he likes to go to that well. So if he's on the field, I would expect him to be targeted.
Nice, love it. Benjamin St. Juice. We've been hearing a lot of positive things about him so far. Are you buying that or pumping the brakes on that guy?
Um, I'm going to. It's not. I'm going to pump the brakes,
Yep.
but only because I don't necessarily think. I understand the rationale of moving him to slot corner. He's a bigger guy at 6'3". You have a lot more matchup advantages that way. But it reminds me of what um, I just have kind of past memories like burned into my brain, and I remember going through this with Fabian Moreau a few years ago.
Yeah.
Washington did, and how much he struggled there in the slot, even though he was like clearly better for the outside. They had this insistence on putting him there, and I think the reason like I'm cautious with that is Moreau weighs heavily into that. But I also think Benjamin St. Juice kind of had a nice year at outside cornerback when he was healthy
Yeah.
last year, and so
Yeah.
he struggled for sure at certain points, but I thought he was kind of really starting to find that rhythm. And so, if he's learning a new position, is he going to carry that rhythm into year 2, or is this just essentially another rookie season for him? That's what I would say about that. It's just because of his unfamiliarity with the position. Um, I think it. I just have question marks about it.
Yeah, reservations there. Makes sense. All right. Jamin Davis. I've been hearing a lot about his improvement. Talk to me about that. Pumping the brakes or no?
Uh, yeah, I'm gonna pump the brakes. I mean, I need to see it in game day action. It's hard to get a feel for it. You don't notice him being like, if we want to use a harsh word, exposed on the practice field. Nothing like that. It seems like he's kind of blending in, which I think for Davis is a positive thing. You don't see him chasing after guys after missing the tackles or anything like that. I think there's, you know, they've said that there are improvements in his game. They know more about football than me. I would never pretend to know otherwise. So, you do take them at a word for it. But I think that the big tell for me will just kind of to be see his reps in the season. The stat I like to throw out there is that, in his rookie year, Jamin Davis only played 65, at least 65% or at least 70% of the snaps, just 4 times. I think he played 16 games. So, do they trust him to be on the field? Are they going to always put him out there? It seems like it's going to be yes. But David Mayo hasn't really threatened to steal any of his playing time, but I need to see the bullets kind of fly before I'm ready to say, oh yeah, he's headed for a year 2 surge.
For sure. What about Diami? You mentioned him earlier. I've seen the hype packages from the team social media. Are we pumping the brakes or are we buying him, Diami?
Honestly, I could go either way on that one. It does seem like he's made some strides. Had a really nice catch the other day. I guess it depends on a few things. One, if Curtis Samuel is healthy, don't laugh. If Curtis Samuel is healthy, then it's going to see him getting on the field, because I think the pecking order is clearly Florence, Samuel, Dotson. Like, if those 3 are healthy, those are going to be the guys. They're gonna, depending on the package, Dotson will be in the slot and Samuel will be on the outside, or vice versa, or whatever. But if there is additional room for Diami Brown, yeah, I do think there's a role for his team. It's just, can he be consistent enough? Like, Diami Brown seems like a guy to me that maybe will be like, oh, Diami Brown had a pretty good year. And then you look at the stat line, it's like, oh, he only had like 250 yards. It's going to be one of those. I don't know if the production is going to match the perception, but if the perception is that he's had a pretty good year, I think Washington would take that.
For sure. All right, I got 3 rookies for you. I'll start out with Sam Howell. I saw some hype about how good he looked on the first day of training camp. Are we pumping the brakes there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if there's necessarily needs to pump the brakes. It's just more so like he's driving at his own pace, so to say. He's a project. That's what he is. He fell to the 5th round. They can afford to take their time with him. There's going to be no quarterback competition here. If he plays in 2022, it's because things were a disaster and they really went off the rails. Either Carson Wentz was so bad that it required him to be benched, or he got hurt, and then Taylor Heineke didn't work out either. They would have to be like 3-15, or not 3-15, 3-12 to start to get Sam Howell playing time at the end of the season. That's the only scenario I could see him cracking the field, because he has a long way to go.
Absolutely.
He's fine for he seems to be progressing at an adequate pace.
Yeah. We heard a lot about Percy Butler coming out of the draft and the potential of where he might be used. I haven't heard a lot about him since camp has come around, so I personally pumped the brakes on that. But what about you?
Yeah, the reason I thought he was going to have more of a role than maybe I do now is because when he was drafted, they were talking about him being that Buffalo nickel, Landon Collins replacement. But really, that position, they're not even calling it the Buffalo nickel anymore. They're just calling it a slot cornerback, is Benjamin St. Juste. So if St. Juste is going to get Percy Butler's playing time, or Landon Collins' playing time, rather than where is Percy Butler going to fit in? It's much more of just a question mark of how it's going to work. I think he's had his moments in camp. He picked off Taylor Heineke the other day. It was a really nice read. But you could also say the same thing about Derek Forrest. I think Derek Forrest has had a really impressive camp, maybe even more so than Percy Butler at this point. So as you're going to make an argument for who should get playing time where, then I think you could realistically make it for Forrest instead of Butler. And that's kind of why I would pump the brakes. I don't think there's anything wrong with Percy Butler. It's just more of a math equation of how are they going to get all these guys on the field.
Yeah, you explained that well. Last one for me, Jahan Dotson. Are we all in on Dotson, or are we pumping the brakes on all the hype around him?
Yeah, no, I'm all in. If he does struggle, it might be the size, but man, he just knows he just has such an impressive catch radius, really smooth hands. He seems like very flexible. I tweeted it out the other day, but he missed this just complete overthrow from Wentz or whatever. It was just one of these sloppy balls, and he still almost hauled it in just by reaching up and grabbing it. It was I don't know if you guys seen this TikTok trend of people rotating their arms the way I'm doing that thing, but I feel like Dotson should join in on that trend because he's a very flexible man.
Let me follow it up with one thing real quick.
Yeah.
The McLaurin, when he came out, what was it, 2019? From everybody covering the team, it was very obvious that he was going to be better than expected, right? As a third round pick. Dotson seems to be following that same trajectory as a first round pick. Is there, from where you kind of saw both of them at in that point in time, who do you think Dotson's ahead of where McLaurin was? Do you think McLaurin's ahead of where Dotson was? Kind of the same, or what?
Yeah, the thing that really stands out about both of them is their maturity. That they really seem poised, and that they just get it. They get the work that's required. They get that you're not supposed to put the cart before the horse, or whatever the saying is. That they're taking their time and really kind of going about this process the right way. In terms of who's making a bigger on the field performance this time of year, I thought Terry McLaurin looked good as a rookie, but it was really when that first game in Philadelphia that was holy crap, who's this kid? Whereas with Dotson, I think you're seeing it just a little bit more, but I also think that's part of being a first rounder versus a third rounder. You're naturally going to pay more attention to the first rounder. And frankly, I think Terry's case a few years ago actually helps Dotson in this case, because you do maybe expect a rookie receiver to contribute a little bit more than players used to.
For sure. Yeah.
Matthew, going back to the secondary and a couple of those guys, I know we touched on St. Juste. Cameron Curl is one of my favorite players. I know Ron Rivera said, he thought Curl was kind of taking another step in his leadership, becoming a little bit more vocal. How does he look back there to you? I've always thought Curl was a really intelligent player and seemed to kind of understand what the offense was trying to do in a lot of situations. How is he looking entering this third year for himself?
Yeah, I think he looks great. That what I mentioned about William Jackson earlier, about him being in sync, I think one of the reasons why none of these guys really kind of stand out, like is in, oh my God, this guy's amazing, is because they're all working together and they're all communicating. But the thing you do notice about Cam Curl is, especially before the snap, he's always checking in with Jackson and kind of making those pre-check reads. And maybe they did that last year, but it definitely seems like they're communicating. You hear this cliche about communication all the time. And maybe because they talk about it so much now that I'm like actively looking for it, but
Right.
you do notice it. And I think the thing that Ken Curl has always had is the being in the right place, the right time, those kind of instinctual reads. But the other day he had this, Carson Wentz had this overthrow that was kind of sailing, and it ended up being a Ken Curl interception because he just read it perfectly, but also just was like hell of a leap to kind of to grab it. And if he can, you're not naturally going to become a better athlete in your third year of your career, but if he can maintain those kind of athletic plays and incorporate them more into it, then yeah, he's going to have a great year. But I think he might be the most underrated player on this team. Right? I think he's really good.
I agree.
Do you think this is the linebacker group we entered the season with, or do you see any kind of move coming down the pike? Because I'm having trouble foreseeing us going into the season with the same linebacking group essentially that we had last year. What do you think about that?
I was having this debate with Ben Standick the other day. We were just kind of chatting just on the sideline, and he's of the position that they're going to add someone, and I think I'm kind of taking the opposite take, just because, Rivera said the other day that at the beginning of camp that they're going to look through the first week and see how these guys do, and then they might add someone. But he's had months to evaluate them through the offseason. They know what they have, and so if they were going to do this, it seems like they would have done it by now, especially because after June 1, the contracts, there's some CBA technicality that I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but they got more money after cutting Landon Collins as a post June 1 cut. So it just feels like they kind of would have done it, but they haven't just quite yet. And maybe they do add someone like a guy like Drew White today, who was a young linebacker UDFA that they were taking a look at. He got carted off, so maybe they do add someone in terms of now that they're down a body, but I don't think it's going to be anyone that's gonna take away playing time from Jamin Davis with Colt Holcomb. It just feels like they would have done it already.
So do you just see the two linebacker set like they ran for the bulk of last year being the norm, with the extra defensive back and running 5 defensive backs, 6 defensive backs at times? You see that? That's basically what it's looking like it's going to be.
And I wouldn't discount the 5 defensive front looks as well.
Right. Yeah.
A lot last year where Colt Holcomb was the only linebacker on the field. I think we could see that again quite a bit.
Just looking at the success we had with last year's defense, I'm concerned about that.
Sure. But I mean, you want to bring John Bostic back?
No, I do not.
He's not there. I know Anthony Barr is out there, but is Anthony Barr more of your traditional off-ball linebacker, or is he a pass rusher at this stage of his career? It's not. There's not it's not necessarily a guy to me that really leaps off the pages. Okay, let's bring him in there. But hey, maybe there's a Carolina guy.
Just holding out for Kuechly to come back. I'm sure of it.
He might be a better option at this point.
Yeah. Maybe. Matthew, we greatly appreciate your time. Folks can read your work with the Washington Times, correct?
Yeah.
I saw you put out a great piece there on the Brian Flores situation. So make sure you go and check that out. Make sure you follow Matthew on Twitter. Matthew, man, we cannot thank you enough. We appreciate you for stopping in with us, and hopefully we can have you back soon.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Anytime you want.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right, that was Matthew Parrish from the Washington Times. He does great work. And if you are not following him on social media, what are you doing wrong in your life? Go follow him. Make sure you stay tuned with the updates. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. Brian, So we got a lot from Matthew about camp because that's what everybody's caring about. From all the things that you've been following about camp, what's the one thing that stands out to you so far?
We touched on it with the Jamin Davis stuff, is how little we're hearing about Jamin Davis. I mean, Jamin Davis is a first-round pick. You think about this year's first-round pick, Jahan Dotson. Every other tweet, every other article, every other video is about Jahan Dotson. And we get, crickets when it comes to Jamin Davis. We saw one tweet about a pass breakup, and that's really been about it. So that's, the silence on him has stood out to me. I don't know if that's good or bad. Probably lean towards it being bad, because if there was a lot more there, we would hear about it. So that's one thing that stood out to me, and that's a little concerning.
Yeah, it is. I want, now that the pads are on, I want to see if that continues. You know what I mean? Maybe, just maybe, when they get to thumping, that he stands out a little bit more than he has. I don't know. Is he giving off first round pick vibes when you're kind of hoping just for some news? No, but hey, we gotta take what we can get, I guess. Eric, what about you, man? What's standing out to you?
I'm just really overwhelmed by the just amazing positivity of our fan base right now. Just taking the Curtis Samuel injury in stride, and the Carson Wentz just being completely even keeled. Yeah, I'm lying. Okay, yeah, we're really overreacting like we do in training camp situations. Just stop, man. Look, it's the second week of the preseason. I get it. Curtis Samuel was hurt all last year, but really, just let's let this thing play out before we just write him off. I'm just seeing so many people standing on the ledge ready to jump because this dude's not, he's not playing the second week of the preseason. Let's get him out there for week one. That's what really matters. Now, the Wentz interceptions, I did read a reporter that covered them at Philly was basically kind of intimated that he was very similar to Heineke, and that he's not really a great practicer. And, that could be leading into this, also the growing pains in the offense, and by all accounts, how well the defense is playing. So I'm willing to give him some time. I'm not expecting a monster season from him personally, but I'm willing to give him some time to grow into this offense. I'm just telling all the fans, just step back from the ledge for a little bit. Just enjoy your summer before the misery of the regular season starts. That's all I'm saying. You have plenty of time to be miserable in September.
Oh, come on, man. The thing with the Wentz interceptions, and that doesn't bother me as much as maybe most people, he doesn't generally throw them in the regular season. You know what I mean? So I would be more concerned if he were fumbling, or if he was just, doing crazy things, not seeing the rush well in the pocket. Those are the kind of things that concern me about Wentz. So if I'm hearing that kind of stuff in camp, then I'm concerned. The interceptions, to me, are a guy trying to figure out what he can and can't do within the offense, passes he can and cannot throw to his receivers, so I'm cool with that. If he wants to experiment right now, by all means, hit the lab. You know what I mean? Make it happen. But when the regular season comes, I am fairly confident that he's going to be a lot more conservative with the football.
Yeah, I had a coach tell me once, you want to make the mistakes in practice, not in the game. So all these interceptions, this is when he is supposed to do it. Just like you said, Ellie, we want those mistakes. We want him to test things out now, as opposed to on Sunday where he says, you know what? Terry's triple covered. Let me just throw it down there anyway, even though I can't see where he is, and try something crazy like that. No, let's try those things now so we know better for the regular season. So I'm not really worried about those interceptions, and I think with the pads on, you'll probably see a lot of those interceptions slide, because the offensive line will give Carson a little bit more time, as opposed to that defense kind of running free when they didn't have pads on.
Brian, scale of 1 to 10, how pumped were you when he said Brian Robinson was the real deal? I saw your face
his
light up.
eyes bulge out of his head when he said it.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, so happy. But I mean, it was more so confirmation of what I already suspected about Brian Robinson. I just think it's going to be different how he's utilized. I think everyone thinking that he's just going to be there for a breather for Antonio Gibson, I think we'll be a little bit surprised by how he's used this year. That's all.
Derrick Henry 2.0. That's what Brian's thinking back saying.
Adrian Peterson. Eric, within 5 minutes of us being in Ashburn together in June, you looked at me and said, "Man, that number 85 is a giant, right?" And then when they started doing their drills, you immediately pointed out to me, what he can and cannot do, right? His movement. How excited are you, Eric, about Colt Turner and what we've been hearing about him?
I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in games. I've seen a lot of what he did in college, and I like it. I saw a couple people floating Jordan Reed comparisons. He's not Jordan Reed. Just he's not. So stop. Okay, Jordan Reed was just different. But Turner has a lot of potential. He's one of those guys that just finds himself open, and he can catch balls that are not completely accurate. He can be a really good safety valve. It's just a question of can he do it consistently at an NFL level. So far, the returns in camp have been positive. But yeah, I'm excited to see him play. I'm not 100% with Matthew. I am pumping the brakes a little bit on him just because we haven't seen him in a game yet. But I do like what I'm hearing, and I like what I saw of him, and I like his college tape. But he is definitely not Jordan Reed. But that's okay. He doesn't need to be. He can get open and he can score touchdowns, and that's all we need from him.
Yeah. I mean, I love the point that Matthew made about Wentz and his tight ends, and he's clearly developing a chemistry with Turner. But you're right. You have to see it against defenses that are have schemed all week to try to take him away. I kind of see like with John Bates and Colt Turner, they both combine to give you what you get from Logan Thomas when Logan Thomas is healthy. But I think if we have a specialist like Turner and just a purely athletic tight end, I think that can really be a game changer for us, especially when we start talking about, what are we going to get from Cam Sims in this offense? What are you going to get from Diami? I don't know, but a guy like that can really fill in some of those holes of that are left by some of the lower tier wide receivers on the roster. Now, I'm completely hopeful for Diami. Every time I see a positive tweet about him, my eyes light up like Brian's lights up when he hears about Robinson Jr. So I am a full hope for Diami. You know what? And speaking of that, second year players, I want you guys to tell me if you guys are still on the boat with the guys or if you're starting to get off of the boat for our second year guys now that we're starting to hear about them in training camp. And I want to start with Jamin Davis. Brian, are you getting off that boat or are you still waiting and hoping?
I'm waiting and hoping. I want to see him out on the field in preseason. I want to see him run. I want to see him chase down some running backs. I want to see him make a play on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So I'm still waiting. I'm still hoping. He has got so much talent that if he even uses half of that talent, he's going to have a really good year.
Yeah. What about you, Eric?
I'm on the Jamin boat still. It may turn out to be the Titanic, but I am on it. I haven't. Again, I might be in the minority here. I still don't think he was terrible last year. Like he wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination. He was basically an average NFL linebacker. And again, this is a guy that had virtually no experience coming into the league. So I'm still on the boat. I think he can be a really good linebacker. I just hope that I don't end up eating my words because I might be off the boat this time next year if things don't pan out in 22.
Yeah, I think he was an average NFL rookie linebacker. I think that's how I would say it.
Yeah.
But he was better than a lot of people give him credit for last year. I think people kind of fold in the fact that they wouldn't put him on the field and say, okay, well, this is a lot worse than what we thought. He wasn't great, but he did make some plays, and he made some very key plays at certain points in some games. So I'm still on the boat too. There might not be a motor on it. It might be a paddle, but I'm still on the boat, and we're still going, down the river. All right, what about Cosme? We just put out something on Cosme. I'm fully on board with Cosme. I thought he played very well last year when he was healthy. Anybody not on the Cosme boat at this point?
Just stay healthy. That's the main thing. That's the question mark there. If he can stay healthy, great. But he couldn't stay healthy last year. So I'm on the boat, but he needs to make sure that he takes care of his body and stays on the field.
Yeah.
Agreed. 9 games last year. When he played, he looked really, really good. But that's not enough. We need 17 games out of him.
For sure, especially at that right tackle position. St. Juice, Eric, still on the boat with St. Juice?
I'm on the Buffalo nickel boat. It's a floating, but yeah, he's another one like Cosme. He was okay, pretty good at times last year, and he just needs to stay on the field. Concussions are tricky, but they also tend to happen more than once. So he just, again, if he can stay on the field, I think he'll be okay.
No, I have run far, far away from the boat. I'm on land, and I'm not even going near the dock for St. Juice. I know there's a lot of people who watched him last year and think he played really well. I am not one of those individuals. And I'm very worried that if they put him in the slot, a 6'3" corner against some of these quicker twitch guys. We saw Dax Milne, put a move on him earlier today and get by him and make the reception there. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried about if they put him in the Buffalo nickel. This gentleman has had a couple of concussions, and he's now going to be expected to play near the line of scrimmage where guys are bigger and stronger, and he's going to have to be better in run support. No, thank you. I'm way off of his train boat, all of it.
I was kind of off the boat when we drafted him, Eric. If you remember, when we talked about St. Juice, we thought he was a decent player, but he was kind of like not a star, type player, because his film in college was really a lot of trailing, and he was there where the play was to be made, but he tackled the guy instead of making the play a lot. Right? So I'm still where I always was. I'm not completely, out on him, but I'm just not super hype about where I think he can go. Diami, I'm fully on board. I love Diami. I think he adds something to this offense. Both of you guys agree?
Yeah, I wonder about his role. Like, I think the talent's there, and I think what I really think is you're going to see him blow up in the preseason with Sam Howell throwing him the ball. And then we're gonna, he's gonna go Marco Mitchell and just ghost out in the regular season. Especially if Curtis Samuel's healthy. I don't know about Diami yet. He seemed like even last year kind of a one-trick pony, just get deep. So if he's expanded, I'm willing to get back on the boat. But I think I'm just kind of standing on the dock with my foot in the air, thinking about it right now. I'm not 100% on board with Diami yet.
You're sitting on the dock of the bay. Got it.
Nope, not even doing that. I'm on the dock of the lake. It's a pontoon boat with Diami. Yeah.
I'll go ahead and get in the boat with Diami. I think with Carson and his ability to stretch the field with that arm, hopefully we can use Diami the right way. I think Eric's right. He may just be that one-trick pony, but I think that trick is pretty good and it's NFL level worthy, which is getting vertical right away and going up and getting the football and coming down with it. I think if you try to have him run some of these short crossing routes like we had him do last year, he's going to look lost. His concentration isn't there. He may have some drops, which is all that we saw last year. He's more dialed in, more focused when he's running down the sideline towards the end zone. So let's do that. Let's be that vertical passing game, and I think he'll do a lot better in that type of role.
For sure. All right, we're a John Bates podcast. I'm not going to ask about him. I know everybody's still on the boat on John Bates. As long as
Prestige worldwide, right there.
Yes, Derek Forrest. We heard some good things about him from Matthew Paris. Are we all in on Derek Forrest here?
No. I'm not. The only image of Derek Forrest in my mind is him just completely getting fooled by that fake in the preseason last year that he was chasing down. Again, I think it was against the Bagels. Yeah. Like, he ended up in like Louisville, Kentucky before he realized the play was going the other way. Like, that was the worst thing I've seen. It was so, and that's all I think about when I think. And I don't like, he was IR most of last year, right? He didn't really play.
Yeah.
So I got to see him not bite on that kind of fake again, because that was like the worst thing I've ever seen. You got to find that YouTube clip and put it, because you know what I'm talking about. It was bad.
I do. We joked about that before. Yeah. Cam Cheeseman, where are we at with that?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's a long snapper. I mean, if you got somebody else better, let me know. But if that's all we got, we'll ride with him.
I mean, you didn't hear his name at all last year. I think it was a little rocky at the beginning of the year. As long snapper. As long as you don't hear his name, there's really no complaints.
All right. I know Eric loves guys with 3 names. So William Bradley King. Are we good there?
I'm riding with him.
I don't know the difference between him and James Smith-Williams. Like, I literally, you could put them both with their jerseys on in front of me and I wouldn't be able to tell. Like, I just don't know. So sure, he's fine. But I don't know.
I'll
I don't
go
remember a single thing about him last year.
only because we haven't seen enough of him play. I've seen enough of James Smith-Williams. I haven't seen enough of William Bradley King. So I want to see more of him.
I'm gonna look Shaka Tony. I'm gonna say I'm off the boat with Shaka Tony. I still have my boarding pass if I can get back on the boat at some point, but I feel like he's one of those guys where if he was going to be something, you would have seen a little bit more by now from Shaka Tony. But there very well could be plays that I'm not thinking of that he has made at some point that really validate what he can be. I just don't personally recall seeing that. So I'm like, I'm off the boat with Shaka Tony.
I think with Shaka, he does have like a little bit more burst in terms of pass rush. Now, he's a lighter guy compared to all those other ones, so he's not going to be much use to you in the run game, and I think that's part of the problem with him getting on the field. But if we use him as a situational pass rusher, he's got some juice to him more so than any of the other defensive ends who are a little bit bigger and slower than he is. But I'd like to see some more of him in some passing downs.
Come on, Eric.
Yeah, I'm with Ellie on this one. I think they should have moved him to outside linebacker last year and just started his career off that way. I think he'd be better suited there. But that's just based on purely just what I saw of him in college, which wasn't a ton. He's really undersized for his position.
Yeah. And
I think I'm kind of with Ellie. If he was going to be that pass rusher, that guy, I think you would have at least seen a flash. And he was barely on the field last year when he was like, you didn't notice him. So I don't know. I don't really think when you get to the 7th round picks, there's much of a boat anyway. It's like one of those boats in the school play with the like cardboard waves going around it. That's pretty much the boat for Shaka Tony. So I'll stay on that because I'm not going to sink or drown. But I don't see him having much of an impact in the future.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong, Shaka. I want to be wrong about you.
Yes. Shock us all. You see what I did there?
Wah, wah, wah.
All right.
Dad jokes declassified.
Dax Milne. We just heard good things from Matthew Parrish about Dax Milne. I personally was just like, he's a guy last year. I thought he got some opportunities, and I thought he did really well. And then Adam Humphries came along, and it was kind of like, well, there's Adam Humphries' show. So I am going to say that I'm still off the Dax Milne boat only because, much like Cam Sims, where's the opportunity? I see him make plays, then I don't see him on the field. So I don't know. I can't get on the boat because I don't know what time the boat's leaving.
Dax Milne,
off the field.
Yeah, Dax, he seems like he's going to be that kind of guy who just finds a way to stick on the roster every year, but then you never see him. That's just the vibe I get from him. So the boat is, I'll be on the boat, but it's like the old battle cruiser that doesn't sail anymore that you just walk on to tour because it doesn't really go anywhere. So that's the Dax Milne boat. It's the floating museum that isn't actually seaworthy. I think he'll probably I don't know. I can see him making the roster and then not hearing about him. We're having the same conversation next summer.
We got a lot of guys in that category. We got the Troy Apke's on that boat of the just finds a way to make a roster. The Danny Johnsons, although Danny Johnson did contribute a lot down the stretch last year. And a few other guys that are just kind of roster guys, Cam Sims,
Corn Elder, those guys.
Yes, who's apparently having a good camp. At least he was the first couple of days. So we'll see. But Brian, Dax Milne.
No, I absolutely am on board with Dax Milne. I think so we don't have anybody who's Curtis Samuel can play in the slot, but he can also play outside. So if he's hurt, we need somebody who's a true slot Jahan will play in the slot some, but he'll also play outside. I think Dax is a true slot, and I think if he can, return some punts or return some kicks, I think that'll certainly help boost his chances of making the team. So I think he serves a purpose as your last wide receiver on the roster.
I like it. All right, folks, thank you for checking us out, and thank you again to Matthew Paris. Once again, make sure you will follow him on social media and his content with Washington Times. We appreciate you taking this ride with the Commanders Declassified podcast. Make sure you check out our site, WFTDeclassified.com. You can find us on social medias. They are Declassified WFT. We have at ETROD42. And of course, Brian is at Mr. 1 on Twitter. Check us out, interact with us. And if you are going to be at FedEx on Saturday, come find us. There will be Commander Declassified shirts that you can look us up, dap us up, talk to us, interact with us. We are all very antisocial people, except for Brian. No, but you can talk to us anyway. Nonetheless, thank you for checking us out as always. Tell a friend and tell a friend. We are out of here. Peace.